Welcome to session 3 of Sink into Support, and today our session is all about being held, or allowing ourselves to be held, to find or even create for ourselves a safe landing space that we can just settle into. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we are without support. In fact, it means the opposite. It is that we find support, create support, ask for support, whatever this time looks like for you, in order to create that safe landing space so that we can feel held. And so with that, I just want to point out that I do have a chair with me for class today. I'd like to take a different supported shavasana, at least give the option to. And so for class today, if you are curious about that supported shavasana, we have done it in future classes. If you haven't done it with me before, you can use a chair, you can use a coffee table, you can use even a couch. Anything that's nearby, doesn't exactly have to be a wooden chair, but anything nearby that you could put your legs up on with your knees bent towards the end of the class for a supported resting pose, shavasana. Or, as always, you can forego that and choose a different resting pose whenever we get there. And so for this beginning of our time together, I welcome you to find a supported child's pose. And if that shape does not feel welcome to your body in this moment, you can choose any other shape that does feel welcome. But here I have my bolster right in front of me. I have a nice blanket for my knees. And if you want a second blanket to wrap over your body and just kind of cocoon in, then that is always an option. So, if you'd like to join me for child's pose, you might start by taking your knees as wide as, or maybe even a little bit wider than the bolster that's in front of you. And if you don't have a bolster, you could take blankets and just stack blankets on top of one another until you get to your desired height. You could also just use regular pillows. Maybe stack a few regular pillows if you want. And I like to bring my bolster in a little bit close to me so that my legs are just on the outside of the bolster and I can feel a little bit of support in my inner legs. And I like to allow my toes to touch back behind me. You might explore this as well. So rather than the toes overlapping, which may or may not cause a little bit of discomfort. And then you could allow your hips to settle down toward your heels in that direction. And then settle on your bolster. You might allow your arms to rest on either side. Maybe your gaze turns to one side and you just rest a cheek on the bolster or your blankets, whatever you have beneath you, if you have chosen this shape. And I welcome you to just arrive. You might even scan through your body. Noticing the shape you have found or created for yourself, and notice, oh, how does my body feel here? Does it feel like I'm comfortable? Do I need to adjust anything? And then whatever you notice that needs adjusting or tending to, you can take a moment to do that. At any point in this class, you can say yes or no to any options given. You are always free to choose whatever it is that your body needs in this moment, even if it's something different than what I'm doing. I'm here as a guide to just provide options, but you are the captain of your ship. You have final say at all times. And so as we rest here in this supported child's pose, or any shape you've chosen, scanning through the body, starting to feel the support, the literal physical support beneath you. Noticing, I don't have to completely hold myself up. There's this support here that I can start to release into a little bit, if that feels safe. And as we're here for the next few moments, I offer you this affirmation. It was actually written and created by Elle, who is a writer and a poet. And she writes, "I am learning to validate and affirm myself. I will give myself the same love, care, and support that I give others." I will give myself the same love, care, and support that I give others. What does that look like for you in this class? I'll just keep it just to this next 50 minutes or so. What does that look like for you, your heart, your body? How can you give yourself the same love, care, and support for these next 50 minutes? So I welcome you to work with that affirmation if it aligns with you. If it does not, please feel free to create something that does. And if you'd like to stay here longer in this supported child's pose, if this is feeling especially cozy and held, then you can stay here until you're ready to move. And when you decide that you are ready to move, you might begin to press yourself up. And take a moment. There's no need to rush as you slowly find your way away from the floor, noticing any subtle shifts. And then you could move your bolster to one side, kind of moving it out of the way. We won't need it for another little while. And I invite you to come into a tabletop shape on all fours. And here, it might feel welcome to have a blanket underneath your knees, especially if you have hard floor like I do. This is just to support your knees. And so as you find your way into a tabletop, you might begin to rock in any way that feels welcome. Maybe finding some organic movement. And so here, when I say organic movement, I literally mean anything that feels natural to you in this moment. There's no agenda. There's no right or wrong. There's just fluid, intentional, curious movement. And so I welcome you to move in any way, knowing that you are in the privacy of your own space. If it helps to close your eyes, you could do that as well. For another 2 or 3 rounds of breath. And if you feel complete here, you might meet me back at center in our tabletop. And if you'd like, you could join me for some rhythmic cat-cows. And so with your next in-breath, you could explore sending your spine down towards the floor, like concaving your back. And here you might even notice your shoulders. I like to bend my elbows a little bit so that I can roll my shoulders back and then lengthen back through the arms. Here's our cow pose. Just allowing the spine to sway down. And then with your next exhale, you might begin to curve the spine up towards the ceiling. And you might even allow your tailbone and your chin to gently curl in toward one another. Noticing the expansion in your back body. Staying here as long as you want. And if you care to, you can inhale and allow your spine to drape down towards the mat. Maybe continuing in this rhythmic motion at your own pace, in your own way. For another 2 breaths, 2 rounds of breath, so 2 inhales, 2 exhales. And as you begin to find completion here, you might release the spine back to neutral. Option 2, turn your wrist in the opposite direction. So bring the back of your hand, just one hand, to the mat and gently stretch the wrist in the opposite way. Be really mindful here. We have lots of tiny little bones in our wrists called carpals. And so be really slow here. You can take your time. You don't have to force it. You know your body best. And then when you are done with that side, you might roll through the wrist a little bit. Maybe stretch through the fingers. And then take the other side when you're ready. And then when you feel complete there, you could roll through that wrist now. Maybe stretch through the fingers. Okay. So from tabletop, I'd like to start twisting into the spine, moving it in a different way that we don't normally move it during the day. And with your knees in together at center, you could extend your right leg back behind you and then allow your right knee to cross back behind your left, kind of like you're sitting in a chair and you're just crossing your legs over one another. So we end up, if you look down at your knees, your right leg is crossed back behind the left. Your feet and your ankles will just naturally fall anywhere that feels right to you. So bring some awareness here into the hips, into the body. You might rock back and forth. Just taking a few breaths. Noticing what's present for me here. And then I'll meet you back at center when you're ready. And here you could begin to walk the hands forward just a little bit and then pause. And let's bring some awareness to our core. And this is to stabilize and support the lower back. So with your next exhale, you might begin to draw your core in towards your spine. And then hold your engagement there, keeping your core at least 50% activated. Continuing to breathe. And then if you want, you could continue walking your hands forward until you lower your forehead down to the earth. And if having your legs twisted like this is not helpful and not where your body wants to be today, you could take this same shape just from our tabletop pose without the twisted legs. So you choose. And then with your next inhale, you might begin to lift the head to look at the hands. And then option to walk your hands over to the right. And then again, lower the forehead back down and feel what's going on in the left side of your body as we take this very opening side body stretch for one more breath in and out. And then if you're ready to leave this shape, you could lift your head to look at your hands. Walk the hands a little bit closer toward you and then back to center. And then keeping the twist if you are enjoying it, or releasing the twist and just taking a tabletop shape if you prefer that. But we'll stay here for another moment as we bring the right hand and plant it on the floor. And then with your inhale, you could begin to breathe in. And then exhale, you might peel the left shoulder, left arm back, and reach the left fingertips up towards the ceiling. And then option to stay right here, or option to move with it. Maybe reaching your left arm over towards your left ear, maybe reaching it back. Maybe make these half circles if you want. Or just stay at center for one last breath. And then when you're ready to release, I'll meet you back at center. You could extend your right leg, maybe roll through the right ankle, and then release. Take a moment to roll out your wrists. I know that we were really heavy on the wrists there for a few minutes, so you can give a little break, maybe even bringing the backs of your palms together. Just gently stretching the wrists in the opposite direction. And then if and when you're ready for the next side, you might bring the knees together if you want to take the twist on this side, because you can forego it. There's no right or wrong here. And then when you're ready, you could extend the left leg and then allow the left knee to fold back behind the right. And then we'll take a breath in and we'll exhale. Engage the core by exhaling the air out and drawing your core in toward your spine. And then hold that there so that our lower back can be nice and supported. As we walk our hands forward and maybe even lower the forehead down towards the earth if that feels welcome. As we breathe here just for a moment or two. Last one. And if you're ready to find your way up, you could lift your gaze, walk your hands back toward you just about a little bit or about halfway. And then option to walk your hands over to the left. And then lower right back down. Taking your time here. These are some really big shapes for the side body. And we are exploring the side body and opening it up because we'll be exploring some twists later on, and this just helps create a bit of space. So with our last breath in and out, can you feel the spaciousness that you're creating on the right side of your body? And with your next inhale, you might begin to lift your gaze, draw your hands back in closer toward you, and then walk back to center, unraveling as you see fit. And then option to take a child's pose here for just a moment. Any child's pose that feels welcome to your body, whether that means allowing the forehead to come to the mat or keeping your gaze up by stacking your fists underneath your chin. Just taking another 1 or 2 breaths here. I encourage you to continue making choices for yourself during this class that allow you to care for and love and support yourself in a way that you so often give to others. And with your next inhale, if you are ready to leave this shape, this child's pose, because you could stay here longer if that is what your body wants. But if you are ready, you might begin to shift yourself forward. And then option to find a downward facing dog. And here that could look like really planting your hands on the floor, spreading the fingertips out wide and tucking the toes. And then when you're ready, breathing in and lifting the hips up. I like to keep my knees bent here to create some space so that I can really lengthen through the shoulders as I press back through the hips. But this might feel or look different for you, and that's okay. So option 2, pedal through the feet if you want. You might just explore leaving both knees bent and just exploring that shape and how it feels. Or you could, like pedaling a bike, release one heel down, lift it up and release the opposite heel down. And if your hamstrings are feeling really tight, you could always take your feet as wide as the mat and notice what that might feel like in your body and how that could change your experience of this pose. So one more breath here. And then whether you are in tabletop or down dog, option to extend your right leg back behind you, or not, you could always forgo that. And then as you exhale, wherever you are, you could begin to draw your right knee forward and plant it on your mat. Maybe on the outside of your right hand if a wider stance feels welcome. As we find a low lunge. And here is where some blocks could be really helpful. You might grab a block or two and place them right underneath your hands. And this just lifts the floor to you to provide a little bit more support. So maybe using this block is a way to provide some support for your body in this moment. Option to stay right here. This is a good place to be. Or option to press the hips back and inhale. Lift the chest, lift the arms. This is another good place to be. You could pause right here. A third option is to swim your hands back behind you and clasp your hands. When you clasp your hands together, you can keep the elbows bent and roll the shoulders back. Now this might be really tight. It might be, it might create some big sensations. And so if this feels overwhelming, but you still want the shoulder opener here, you could simply grab your wrists and practice rolling the shoulders back. So you choose. Hands can be planted on the block or the floor. You could inhale and reach your arms up, or you could clasp the hands or grab opposite wrists. So you choose. There's no wrong choice. What can you do right now in this moment to care for and support yourself as we explore this shape for the next 2 rounds of breath? And if you feel complete here, you might release the clasp in your hands if you have it, and come back down to the floor. And sending the right foot back, taking a moment, maybe lengthening out through your left leg. And then if you took a down dog previously and you'd like to take one again for this left side, you can. If you want to forego down dog and stay in tabletop, that's also an option. So I'll meet you wherever you want to be. And taking one breath at center, in and out. And then if you want to, inhale and lengthen your left leg back behind you. That's an option, or you could keep it grounded. But wherever you are, you could exhale and draw your left knee in, and then plant it on the floor. Sorry, plant your left foot on the floor. Settling down, using any props here that feel supportive. Adjusting your stance if needed, and just taking a moment to arrive. Option to stay here. This is option 1. With the hands planted on the block or the floor. Option 2 is to send the hips back, and inhale, reach the arms up. Option 3 is to swim the hands back. If you are clasping your hands, notice which way you naturally want to do it first, which finger is on top, which thumb is on top, and then switch the clasp of your hands if you want to explore it in a different way on this side. Or you could grab a hold of your wrists. And I welcome you to be here for another 2 or 3 rounds of breath. However, you are always free to leave any pose sooner if that is what your body's asking of you. You don't have to force yourself to stay here as long as I do if it's causing pain or discomfort. Last breath out. If you are ready to release, you could come back down to the floor if you found your way lifted. And this time, I invite you to step yourself forward. So I like to tuck my back toes, lift up on my back knee, and then kind of springboard my back foot forward. And I'll meet you. So whether you do that or you take a different way to get here, I'll meet you in a forward fold. Please take your time. There's no rush. However you get here, I'll be here when you do. And here in this forward fold, you might bring some awareness to your knees. Notice if your knees are really locked out. And if that's causing
some rigidity or some tension in your body, it might feel welcome to soften your knees. It might also feel welcome to take your knees as wide as the mat, if you want a little bit of a wider stance. And here, you could continue to fold forward as much as you want, for as long as you want. And with an inhale, whenever you're ready to take it, you could bring your hands to your shins and lengthen through the spine, finding a tabletop with your back, a halfway lift. Maybe we pause here for more than one breath, just to kind of give our blood pressure a moment, to give our body a moment. And then when you're ready to release back down into a fold, maybe you take it on an exhale and release right back down. With your next breath in, you could bend your knees, press into your feet, and rise. Maybe sweep your arms up overhead. And an exhale, option to bring your hands down to heart center. Option to adjust your stance as needed so that you feel nice and stable in your body. And then whether you have your hands at heart center or whether you release your hands down to your sides, can we take 3 breaths, 3 rounds to just feel into our body. Feel into your feet, maybe allowing your toes to spread, allowing your feet to take up a bit more space. I am learning to validate and affirm myself. I will give myself the same love, care, and support that I give others. If you're ready, I welcome you to move to a wall that's close to you. And you could take your mat if you want. I'm going to. I'm just going to move my mat against the wall. And then I'm going to bring my left arm to the wall. And I'm going to allow my left elbow to touch the wall, and it's going to create like this measuring stick for me. So we're creating like this 90-degree angle here where the left elbow is our measuring stick on the wall, and we have our left shoulder, and then my left palm is on the wall. So we have our measuring stick, our 90-degree angle, and then with your next in-breath, you could just slide your left arm right up the wall. And then exhale, you might begin to allow your left arm to just trail back on the wall. Now, you totally control how much of a stretch this is for you. So you could notice how my right hip and my right shoulder are still very much facing forward. But if I were to allow my body to come in toward my shoulder, it takes the stretch away. So if this stretch is feeling like really big, then you could just allow yourself to just gently turn into it. Turn into the stretch until you feel that it's at a place that feels appropriate and right to you. If it helps, you might even place your right hand on your stomach or maybe on your hip, just to kind of gauge where you are. And we'll settle in here for another 4 breaths or so, making adjustments as needed. If you feel any tingling or pain or searing or shooting pain down your left arm or anywhere in that area, that's a sign from your body to ease off. Last breath here. All right. You could begin to slide your left arm back up the wall and then bend your elbow and come right back to our starting point. And here we can bring some awareness into our feet. And option 1 is so you don't have to have your left elbow exactly connected to the wall for this. You could just have your hand connected to the wall to provide some support if you'd like. But we'll bring some awareness into our feet. And when you're ready, you might shift your weight over into your right foot and draw your left knee up. And then we'll just pause here. This is option 1. We could pause and just feel, noticing, does this work for my body? Option 2, if you would like to build on this, you could take a breath in, and as you inhale, you might even explore floating the spine up towards the ceiling. And then as you exhale, you could bring your right hand to your left knee and begin twisting your left shoulder back. And you might even keep your left hand on the wall. In fact, I encourage you to, as this is all about support and receiving support and finding that space where we can still do the work, but we don't have to do it all on our own. And if the twist does not feel welcome to your body today, you could come back to the center. Option to take another 1 or 2 rounds of breath here. And then with your next exhale, you could untwist, planting your left foot on your mat and stepping the right foot back. Now, to start, I'd like to keep our legs straight and maybe even place your hands on your hips if this kind of helps you figure out where your hips are in space. If your feet are bladed, kind of like you're walking on a tightrope, then balancing might be a little bit difficult. And so if you want, you could step your right foot back and then out toward the right. And you can kind of feel into your stance as we just kind of hang out here for a second and feel like, all right, where am I? Do I need to move my left foot a little bit closer to the wall? Is my stance wide enough for me? Do I feel stable? And then once you do feel stable, I invite you to inhale and reach your arms up. And then exhale, you might even begin to start bending into your left knee. So this is a warrior 1. Option 1 is to stay right here. Option 2 is to bring your left hand to the wall, just like where we were a moment ago. And as you exhale, you could start to twist your left shoulder back towards the wall and maybe even bend your elbows and just plant your hands. Feeling the support. Even as you are still doing work to hold yourself up, you don't have to do all of it. The wall can take some of it. The floor can take some of it. The mat beneath you can take some of it. Last breath here. Staying for the exhale if you'd like. And then inhale. You could start to reach your arms right back up. Untwist. And then release your warrior 1. Pausing for just a moment. Whether your hands are down at your sides or maybe at heart center, can you just feel the difference between the left side of your body and the right side of your body? And then when you're ready for the next side, you could turn so that the right side of your body is closest to the wall. And then we'll return back to our measuring stick. So our right elbow can come to the wall. You can adjust your feet, your stance as needed. And then with your inhale, if you're ready to, you could reach your right hand up the wall and then exhale. Slide it on back in a big half circle. And again, you control how much of this stretch that you feel. If keeping your shoulders and your hips squared forward is intensifying the stretch through your right chest and right shoulder, you could mindfully allow your left shoulder to just super little movements at a time to come forward. And then stopping in the space that feels perfect to you, kind of like Goldilocks, like too much, too little, just right. And we'll settle in here for another 3 or so breaths. And again, if you feel any pain or numbness even, you might ease off, listening to these cues from your body. Last breath here. And then if you feel complete on this side, you could inhale and just reach your hand right back up to center. Bend your elbow. And then bring some awareness into your feet. You could keep your right hand on the wall if this is helpful. And then taking your weight into your left foot, you could draw your right knee up. This is option 1. Just staying here, feeling the engagement of your quad, feeling the working of your muscles, feeling the support of the wall. Option 2 is with your next inhale, you could start to lengthen up through the spine. And as you exhale, you could bring your left hand to your right knee and begin to twist, taking your right shoulder back. And breathing here. Another breath in and out. And then releasing and unraveling, planting your right foot on the floor. Taking a moment. And then, depending on the space around you, you might step your right foot forward. Maybe your left foot also goes back. As we set up for our warrior 1 on this side. And I realized I didn't quite explain what your back foot is doing on the last side. So your left foot, your back foot, is kind of at an angle. So it's not exactly straight. It's kind of off to an angle. So if you look at the direction that your left toes are pointing, it's kind of pointing off to the left a little bit, as your left heel can firmly plant on your mat. And as always, you can adjust as needed. This isn't a hard and fast rule. This is a kind of framework for you to work with and then decide where you want to go from there. So if you'd like, you might even place your hands on your hips, kind of notice where you're facing. And then when you're ready, with your inhale, you might reach your arms up overhead and lunge into your right knee. Pausing here and feeling all of the actions taking place. Your core stabilizing you, your right quad firing up. And you might choose to stay right here. Or if you want to take the twist, you could breathe in. And then as you exhale, you could start to twist to the right, bringing your hands to the wall. And again, controlling as much of this twist as you want. And we'll breathe here for the next 3 rounds of breath. Starting to find completion. And with your next inhale, if you're ready to unravel, you could begin to untwist and step out of your warrior one, and maybe moving through the shoulders a little bit, maybe moving through the neck. Okay, we'll begin to move down onto our mats. And so if you'd like to adjust your mat so that you are able to use your supported Shavasana prop, if you will. I have my chair. If you have a couch, a coffee table, or something else nearby, you could use that. So you can adjust the area as needed. All right, so with our space readjusted to our liking, I invite you to come to your area of support. And before we get into our Shavasana, I'd like to take a little bit of a forward fold using our support just to kind of down-regulate. So with your hands on your support, either gripping the sides or just planting your hands, it doesn't matter which one. You could breathe in, and with your feet underneath you, this is our halfway lift. So it might even look similar. This is when we have our hands on our shins. Same principle here. If you are choosing not to work with a support, you could simply just bring your hands to your shins as we breathe in. And then as you breathe out, you could begin to fold forward. And if you have a support in front of you, you could bring your forehead to the support. Maybe softening the knees if that brings some relief. If you don't have any support in front of you, you could just take a regular forward fold if that suits your body. So we breathe in and out. Taking one more inhale here. And exhaling. And then beginning to bend into the knees, lower your hips, and find your way down onto your mat. And here, you can have a blanket nearby if you would like to cover up. And we'll simply bring our legs up onto this support so that our knees are bent. And our legs are supported. Now this, as always, is optional. You don't have to choose this shape to rest in. But it is an option. You could always choose to take the legs up the wall. You could choose to lay flat on your back, or maybe on your stomach or your side, or to simply stay in a comfortable seated shape. There is no right or wrong here. And as you settle in, you might bring some awareness to your breath. Taking these next few breaths as a moment of celebration. Celebrating the fact that you just spent the better part of an hour tending to your own care, loving yourself, supporting yourself, nourishing yourself. That might not sound like a big deal to others, but we know that that's a big deal. And so I recognize you. I recognize and I celebrate right along with you the fact that you chose yourself. And I'll be quiet now for the remainder of our time together, as we'll be in a time of quiet rest for the next 3 minutes. And I'll keep track of time so that you can just rest and let go as much as you want. And I'll let you know when this time of rest is complete. If you are ready to begin moving out of this time of rest, you might begin to add some movement into your body. If you are not ready to move away from this time of rest, you can stay here in this place until you are ready. And if you have your legs up on a support, you might gently draw the knees in toward your chest and just pause here for a moment. And then rolling over to one side and just pausing here. Taking a breath. And then pressing yourself up whenever you are ready. And I'll meet you in any comfortable seated shape. Option to place one hand over your heart and one over your abdomen. And I invite you to bring to mind the affirmation, the community affirmation that I read at the beginning of class. I am learning to validate and affirm myself. I will give myself the same love, care, and support that I give to others. And if you'd like to take one collective breath with me, we'll start just by exhaling our air out. Breathing in. Thank you for joining me. As always, if you have any questions or curiosities, please do not hesitate to email me or leave a comment on the video, and I will be sure to get back to you. My hope is that you feel safe, connected, and at home in your body. Thank you.